Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to another episode of the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Now, have you ever worked in a business where on a rainy Wednesday afternoon, the department suddenly descends into chaos upon discovering that someone somewhere left the company 3 months ago and yet is still somehow roaming the world with a corporate network access and a mobile device? Well, you know what? Don't worry, you're not alone. But a company called Mobi, which is a mobility management platform, is currently enabling enterprises to centralise, comprehend and control their device ecosystems, and also waking up businesses up to the significant carrier and device costs that all come with having a mobile workforce. Now, Mobi also recently released the results of a survey of IT decision makers that revealed that 61% of companies allow employees to use either Apple or Android devices. However, only 28% require their employees to use Apple only, and only 11% require employees to use Android only. So this new study reveals big gaps in the way companies treat mobility. And it's quickly emerging that security and complexity are the biggest challenges to modern businesses. With 91% of organisations saying that they have a current mobile policy, and yet 1/3 of IT decision makers saying they lack confidence in their organisation's ability to identify all their mobile devices that contain sensitive data, is somewhat of a concern. So buckle up and hold on tight, because I want to beam your ears all the way to Boston, Massachusetts, so we can speak with Chris Koeneman from Mobi about the future of MMS and why it is so important to your mobile workforce. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I head up global sales for Mobi, and let me tell you what Mobi does. And probably the best way to explain this is everyone has this experience at home. I don't know about your listeners, but at my home, I am the director of IT at my home. So I'm in charge of all IT at my home. My users are moderately happy with my job, but at times they're displeased. But I keep my users fairly happy. But one part of my job is looking after all of their mobile phones and their plans. And I'm telling you, this is a difficult endeavor. At any point in time, one kid's phone is coming off and we have to replace it, but then that means a different plan, or they're on a plan. They blow through it. Was it related to school? It's a nightmare. And it's for 4 people. It's just myself, my wife, and 2 children. It's a nightmare keeping track of the phones and the upgrades and the plans and all that sort of thing. So imagine a corporation with 20,000 employees and the complexity around managing those mobile devices and plans and who's got what. That's what Mobi does. It's a piece of software. It runs in the cloud, so it's a SaaS solution. It helps a large enterprise keep track of their whole mobility estate. That's what we do.
Now, you did say that you're the IT director for your home. Is it just your home, or are you like me, where your phone will ring at 9 p.m. on a Sunday evening with those tech questions too?
Well, I have to say, one time I was actually in Japan, and I got a text from one of my users, my son, and he said the printer wasn't working at home, and so I had to kind of walk him through how to recycle it and reset it and all of that. So that's part of the responsibility. Yeah, it includes mobility, it includes everything else as IT director for my home.
Now, like you said a few moments ago there, Mobi is a mobility management platform that enables enterprises to centralise, comprehend and ultimately control their device ecosystems. But why are managed mobility services essential, and what are the benefits, do you think?
Yeah, so MMS is essential because with the advent of businesses starting to use Android and iOS, well, what that drove was the need for MDM software. Yeah. And MDM software will secure a device, but it's really sort of and it's very important, don't get me wrong, but it's really sort of isolated. It's all around securing that device and security management associated with that device. What MMS does is kind of connect that MDM with the whole mobility platform. And by that, I mean, who has that particular device, and what service is that connected to, that particular carrier? And more importantly, connects it to all the workflows that happen within an organization as it relates to mobility. Let me give you an example. So let's say someone at a company leaves that company, so they're no longer an employee. How that happens in coping with that event, if you don't have MMS, mobility management service or software, is all of a sudden the IT department says, oh, guess what? So-and-so just left our employment. Oh boy, did we turn off his phone, or what did we get a phone back, or we got to go? So all of a sudden it becomes Keystone Cops when somebody leaves the corporation. So a very mundane task like that, you can configure MMS software to do that for you. So typically MMS software is tied into the HR system with a daily feed, so it knows when someone leaves employment, and then it has configured commands in it. So what does it do? It contacts the carrier, turns off that service, if it's corporate service, so turns off the service, and then reaches through the MDM software on the device and wipes the corporate information off that device. So that's kind of an example of a task that is very important. It's kind of routine, but you don't want to leave it to humans to do it. Software does that a lot better. That's the type of thing that MMS does.
I love the way you compared it to Keystone Cops there, because I've been in IT departments when somebody left the company 2 months ago only to discover that their account is still active.
No, we get it all the time. We'll hear from companies. They'll say, you know what, we probably have hundreds of open carrier accounts that we never did turn off. And that, and then I'll hear from former employees say, this phone, it still works. I don't know when they're going to turn it off, but it's fantastic. I've traveled the world with it.
So what do you think the secret is to having a successful MMS provider?
I think the secret is, kind of think big, but start small. Try to solve a few problems early on. A lot of times, the way that it starts out is, hey, I just want to make sure I'm optimizing my spend with the carriers. And a lot of times that's the first thing that a company will look at with MMS. Hey, I just want to make sure that all of my carrier spend, that I'm at least on the right plan within that carrier. And I just want to make sure that I don't have a lot of the zero use accounts that are out there. So just kind of cleaning it up first, that's a great thing to do. And there's a real immediate ROI on that. You can usually see your total carrier spend actually go down. So kind of think small, and that's an easy cost justified move. And then work your way into making your full-time equivalents, making your FTEs more cost effective. Look at all of those tasks that humans are doing and think, okay, I bet we could configure that in the software, and most MMS is highly configurable. We'll configure that in the software, and that action will take place in the software rather than the human doing it. And I think the final thing is to involve the end users. So most MMS, Mobi included, has an end user side to it. And it's amazing the psychological effect on users when they see very easily on a portal they can access, oh yeah, that trip in Brazil. Oh, that ended up, I had a $200 overage last month when I went to Brazil. Just the psychological thing of seeing that graphically very easily for the end user actually makes most users more responsible with that usage. So I think those are the secrets to an effective MMS solution.
And what kind of pitfalls or challenges do you find awaiting businesses that rush in headfirst into managed mobility services?
I think one of the pitfalls is, and this is true on any implementation of any software. So what I'm about to say, you'll kind of do a face palm and say, of course, but boy, it always comes up, is universal buy-in to that MMS. So a lot of times we'll encounter a group within a corporation that says, we absolutely need this to manage mobility. We will go to implement the software, and then the next phase is a division, or it could be an international group. And all of a sudden we meet stiff resistance, not wanting to do it. And so, I mean, this is true, I think, on any IT deployment, certainly true with MMS, is a universal understanding of the value that the MMS is bringing. And that without that is usually a pitfall in implementation.
Yeah, straight away it conjures up images of here comes IT trying to lock everything down again.
Yeah, I'm from IT. I'm here to help. I don't think so. I don't think so. Yeah.
So that buy-in is incredibly important, but also
Yeah.
how important do you think user education is to in making managed mobility services a success and making sure that there is nothing to fear?
I think it is important. Most in mobility, certainly consumerization is there so that the end users understand what's possible with mobility. So they understand that very well. Letting them know that it's not so much Big Brother, but it's there for them to use, and that, and pointing that end user toward, hey, take a look at what you can view on your own individual account. And Mr. End User, here are a set of actions you can take that you can initiate out of the software. So when it's time for you to order a new phone, you're not chasing a bunch of people and phoning and everything. Look, you go right onto the portal, you go into your space. Here are the options that you have for ordering something new or taking an action, or if you need something, it's right here. So I think end user education is important, and showing them how easy it is, and they can take all of these actions, and there's always a record of that action in the portal as opposed to floating around on an email somewhere. So the end user education really important, and there's a way to do that with MMS.
Now, I also recently read a study from Mobi that revealed big gaps in the way companies treat mobility, and I think it's the security, complexity, all seem to be emerging as the top challenges. But can you expand on those findings from your study?
Yeah, this was interesting, and it came up in a survey that we did, and we see this in observations that we've made with companies. Now, I'll back up 1 second. One nice thing about Mobi is, we have about 155 customers. It tends to be large enterprise. So we see the movements that are happening in the industry. That's a big enough sample size. We'll see the movements. Here's the movement where we're seeing on security complexity. It seems to be related to BYOD. So 5 years ago, there was a rush toward BYOD, the concept that a end user would bring their own device and that the enterprise would save all sorts of money around that. And what we have found out in the last 5 years is maybe that savings isn't quite as great as everyone thought, because even though it's BYOD, a lot of times it still has to be managed. So it's not an unmanaged device, it's still a managed device. It just happens to be BYOD. The management of that device was the big hidden cost. So that cost doesn't go away. And on a lot of BYOD ROIs, that cost was assumed to go away. So the business case for BYOD didn't hold up quite like everyone thought. I'm not saying BYOD goes away by any means. It's still there. But there's been a lot of rethinking about BYOD. Now, so maybe it didn't save us what we thought it would do. But what it also did was it did inject complexity for mobility management. And it was complex because everybody has a different device, a different operating system. So, it injected a lot of complexity and inconsistent security. So when you wanted to deploy an MDM onto that device, and you had a whole variety of different devices, a different variety of operating systems, and even if you think within Android, there's all sorts of different flavors of Android, all of a sudden you're talking about a very complex situation. And when you try to secure those devices, that became more challenging. Here's another aspect about security that we've discovered and observed is, what is a corporation's rights to inject security on a device that they don't own? And, the legal stipulations around this are a little foggy, to say the least, and inconsistent by country, and even in the United States, inconsistent by state. So even if you do want to enforce some security, what are your rights as a corporation on enforcing that security on that particular device? Because of that, because of the complexity and the security, a lot of corporations are saying, you know what? I think we're going to go back and just own that asset, because it's a lot clearer and it's a lot less complex, and it's a lot clearer on what we can do on security. So that's what we have found around complexity and security, and as it relates to BYOD.
Now, I'm quite kind of curious here, because technology is continuously evolving at a rapid rate. So what do you think the future of enterprise mobility actually looks like, and how big a part does AI play in that too?
Yeah, this was interesting, and this popped up in our survey too. I was surprised at how optimistic IT directors are on AI as it relates to mobility. I thought that was interesting. They were pretty optimistic on it. And I think what it's around is more and more we're going to use voice commands for interacting with the not only our devices, our mobile devices, but the mobile applications that are on those devices. So, less keyboarding, more voice-driven commands. Now, behind voice-driven commands, you have to have a pretty hefty AI implementation. I mean, understanding human speech is a challenge for a computer and requires advanced artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. So I think that's where AI and mobility meet. And I think there's great advancements that'll happen on mobile applications being able to take voice commands to execute all of those actions that normally you do through pulling up that soft keyboard and trying to type it in.
Now, you did mention human speech there, and there is a global MMS market out there. We have listeners in, I think, 155 countries to this podcast. So I've got to ask, do you serve the international market and also offer languages other than just English?
Yeah, so there's two parts of that. We do. So one is a translation of the platform. So, imagine our software platform and it's existing in the cloud. So we support about 20 different languages, so the portal can operate in 20 different languages. And the art on this is keeping the same functions and basically the same look and feel, but be able to support that other language. In other words, it's not, you don't want to go out and buy a Japanese version of your platform and then go buy a different version, but instead have one version, common functions, common look and feel, but just being able to toggle it into different languages. And I would say there's been extraordinary advancements in software that helps you build those multilingual capabilities into a SaaS platform. Vastly different, vastly more advanced now than it was even 5 years ago. What we could do now on our portal translation, impossible 5 years ago. But today, then, we can support, and it's very simple. You just go in, click, dink, and all of a sudden you're operating in Portuguese. So we certainly support that portal translation. We also can support end users in multiple languages. So if that end user speaks any one of about 20 different languages, and it's not only verbal, but also a chat box. So a lot of end users feel more comfortable with chat boxes. We can do that in multiple languages as well.
Now, during our conversation here, I'm sure we've delivered a few eureka moments, especially people that have still got phones that are active. For people that have left the office several months ago. So I've got to ask, what is your biggest tip that you can possibly pass on to businesses with how to approach that world of managed mobility services for the very first time?
I'd say the biggest tip is really look at the amount of time. I think this really surprises some businesses because mobility kind of crept up on us. Remember, it used to be just, all right, we just had these feature phones and a Nokia phone, and we used that for business, and we're talking, and and then the BlackBerry came in, and we did BlackBerry, and then we have iOS and Android, and we have the smartphones, and all of these things crept in on us, and we didn't realize how much time we spend on these mobile devices. Also, the expense seems to be sort of dispersed. It's dispersed among multiple carriers, and then we have the cost of that device. So I think, the biggest tip I would say to businesses is really try to assess that total cost, both in terms of direct cost, devices and carriers and that sort of stuff, and also the amount of time your people spend on it. And I think once a company steps back and looks at that, they're almost staggered at, wow, this is the biggest unmanaged cost we have in the business. This is amazing how, we don't have any controls over this or anything. But once you understand that, then you look at some MMS software that can help you manage that, reduce the FTEs that get devoted to that, as well as manage those device and carrier costs. Then I think that is a great opening tip. Then you really understand why that software is so important.
Excellent. Well, a huge thank you for coming on today. But before I let you go, could I just ask that you remind the listeners of the Mobi website details?
You can find us on www.mobywm, so mobywm.com. go there. Lots of good information to learn about mobility management.
Excellent. Well, I think we've both been in IT departments that can occasionally resemble Keystone Cops. But,
Yeah.
but I love what you're doing, and also how you're helping businesses, fully understand the actual costs behind devices and carriers now, because I think it's something that was always on the back burner, but people are starting to wake up to it now. So a big thank you for coming on today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Neil.
If anyone listening is interested in managing mobile, I urge you to take a look at the report that we discussed today over at Mobi. Because when they asked what the enterprise mobility landscape will look like by 2022, nearly 25% of companies plan to eliminate desk phones very, very soon. And 15% actually plan to do so in the next 12 months. And what I also found incredibly interesting was respondents from technology companies are more likely than non-technology respondents to plan on retaining their desk phones. And 50% expect machine-to-machine devices to be commonplace at every enterprise 5 years from now. And the same group still expects laptops, smartphones and tablets to be essential business tools in the next 5 years. And when you combine that with almost 48% of IT decision makers deploying Windows 10, Apple or Microsoft EMS within the next 2 years, we can expect these solutions to help unify the management of all enterprise technologies all into a single platform. I think the report is an incredible eye-opener, so I urge that you check that out. And once you have done, why not let me know your thoughts? As always, keep them tweets coming along to @NeilC.Hughes or email me at techblogwriter@outlook.com. And I'm also working on creating a weekly newsletter for you guys, which will round up all the latest tech news and my tech podcasts and anything else I can put in there. So remember to sign up to that over at techblogwriter.co.uk. But it's time for me to go now, gang. So a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.